with Hi everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started with our virtual unit preview for Unit 3. So this is going to look really similar to the last virtual preview. And if you all have any questions about anything, please feel free to email me. For example, the highlighting or in the unit at a glance is new teaks that we'll be working on. So overview of the unit, what we'll be do where it works for your class. Spiraling is writing a sentence with a capital letter, finger spaces, and periods because scholars really need to master that throughout the year. They need to know how to do that all the way to the end of the year because they will still be getting tested on it. So we really want to make sure that they have that down pat. And then by the end of this unit, what do we want them to be able to take away? Use letter sound correspondences to spell CVC words, punctuations at the end of the sentence, including new punctuations will be question marks and exclamation points. Identify a verb, add verbs to their sentence, create a sentence using a verb, and then create a sentence orally spoken, as well as write sentences that tell a beginning, middle, and end of their idea for writing. Okay, so first, sentence structure. So the very first thing that we were talking about spiraling in, we started this unit, but just touching on it again, it needs to be practiced on a daily basis with your scholars for about a week. Following this, just make sure you are aggressively monitoring those and the needs of your scholars. If a high majority of your class is still struggling doing this, then modeling is going to be key for you. During morning meeting or morning message, if you have this, have some errors in your sentences that focus on these three parts for scholars to come up and correct. Also, modeling how to create sentences with a prompt and have scholars walk you through the sentence checklist and purposely make mistakes. You can also do this with sentence stems and have them posted in a spot for reference in your room. And then, once again, do nows and exit tickets with errors for scholars to do quickly. Center activities are also a plus for them to practice this. So, yeah, just make sure your scholars really have this down. I mean, it's 3 steps. I also included the smiley face check for your scholars or your swag check, whichever one you implemented in your class, just to make sure they're checking their own work. So CVC words, you just want to make sure they understand that they have a beginning, middle, and ending sound. We listen to a word and write down each sound that they hear. Let them know a CVC word is only 3 letters. And they're great because you literally can squeeze them into every single lesson and every single subject anytime you say a CVC word. And then eventually they'll start pointing them out on their own, which is also great. So anytime you read or write one, have scholars sound it out. And it's already included in phonics. So you can even create a CVC wall for your scholars to add words and add pictures to for the lower scholars. And then also including a prompt picture for scholars that already have a lot of CVC pictures is great. It's really, really good for their writing journals. And I created one myself just so you guys can kind of see what that looks like. So on here, I drew a kid with a hat in his hand. I unfortunately forgot to bring markers with me, but I would have colored the hat or cap red. A cat. A dog with a wig on, eating a ham, a bus in the background, the sun, a pig, and the list goes on. Anything you can think of, just drawing a prompt for scholars to write sentences with their sight words like, I see a kid with a red cap. This is something really, really great, and we'll go more into the writing journal in a little bit, but I just wanted you guys to have a visual of what that looks like or what it looks like for my classroom, and then hopefully it gives you some ideas to use in your classroom. And then I also talked about the CVC gallery walk on office hours yesterday. So if you guys can go and look at office hours. Next will be punctuation. Make sure you let them know all sentences have punctuation. Exclamation mark when we're showing strong feelings, question marks when we're asking a question, and periods when we are telling someone something. I last year really had a lot of scholars with the misconception and struggling with what a question was and how to know when to add a question mark. So I created this anchor chart on here at the very top for my scholars to like understand if any of these words are the first word in a sentence that they see or hear, then it's a question. So I really saw like a major turnaround once they were able to like recognize, oh, it started with are or do, so I know this is going to be a question word. This illustration I have at the bottom is just to help my scholars remember when to use certain punctuations. So as a question mark is when I don't know or I'm asking someone something that I don't know. Exclamation point is when I'm surprised or shocked or extremely excited. And then a period is just regular. So regular when I'm telling someone something. So a regular face. So making sure like you raise your voice when you're doing exclamation points. Voice fluctuation really helps scholars as well. Once again, a great time to model would be during morning meeting, morning message. So our next focus will be verbs, and basically telling them a verb is an action word. So this anchor chart that I have here is one that me and my scholars created together. I asked them some examples, and then they told me, and I wrote them up here and put a picture next to it. That picture and word correlation is so great, especially for our ELL learners and also for our low scholars as well. Like it's really great to reinforce for the whole class. Having them act out the verbs in a sentence as you read together really help it stick as well. Like, oh, I heard someone jump and having them jump, or I heard someone was running and acting out the running. Once again, really like that kinesthetic learning, like getting them to do an action with what they're hearing is good. Okay, so writing orally, I wrote orally written sentences. So when you're reading sentences out loud to scholars and having them write what you said, that's also something that's going to be coming up on our CA. So what this looks like, because a lot of scholars really do struggle with their sight words. I do this whole group every morning. It's a morning routine that we do, like when we do counting and all these things in the morning that we want to build fluency with. I do sight words as well. So we start whole group, and then basically add them to our word wall after I introduce them, and then having a scholar point to different scholars to make sure that they understood those words and know what those words are. And we do it in a random order to really make sure that they got it. So not only is that giving scholars ownership, but that's also helping me aggressively monitor. Once again, you're also still doing this in phonics. I only introduce 2 new sight words a week, depending on the mastery of my class and my low scholars. And then once they got that, then I'll add on some more. So it's really great to do, and I'm really seeing a lot of benefits from it. And then as far as the CVC words, just continuing to model it, sounding out those CVC words. So modeling thinking about a sentence and having scholars help you locate where to find the words you're looking for. Like those sight words, like where can I find the word like? And having scholars point to it. Oh, it starts with a L, so I know it's under my L on my sight word on my word wall, and then finding that word. And then also having them help you sound out those CVC words really, helps them build that skill. Sequencing. So with sequencing, something else on our CA is we'll basically orally tell a story, and scholars have to remember the order in which things happen in that story. So what happened in the beginning, the middle, and the end. So basically you're telling scholars that we're working on putting stories in order. They're not always 1, 2, 3. They can be scrambled around. We have to listen to figure out what happened first. Talking about the CVC words they hear, the sight words they hear is great too. So another key thing to do during this is make sure that the scholars write as they go. So as you're reading the story, as soon as they hear the first thing that matches one of the pictures there, go ahead and write a number 1. So if I'm reading a story about a cat that's taking a nap, it's immediately find that picture and write the number 1. So because having them trying to listen to a story all together and remember the order can be a little more difficult for them. But if they do it as you go, then it makes it a lot easier. So the misconceptions in this unit will look very similar to the misconceptions in the last unit. So now we're going to go into the writing process. So including like free writing, writing journals, etc. So what this will look like throughout the week is day one, they brainstorm and begin to write a picture with labels. Day two, add a middle. Day three, add an ending and check for sentence structure. Day four, add details, check for errors. And day five, complete their writing and then share out. That's ideally what it looked like. However, I'm going to also talk about like what is also okay and what else we can see improvement from. So if you haven't already introduced your scholars to their writing journals, this is the time that we want to go ahead and start incorporating this. This will not only reinforce like sequencing and helping them understand what that means, but it will also start getting them in the swing of the writing process. We want them to start building their stamina in writing and also love writing. So the most efficient way to do this would be like breaking each part of the writing process up over the week, which is why I have it broken down day by day, and modeling. That is the biggest part that you can do. The scholars have to see you do it to really understand what to do, and you talking through every step in your thought process really helps them to lock it in and in turn do it as well. So something really big to have, like I showed you all earlier with the CVC picture prompt, having a picture prompt up or a topic such as what they did over the weekend for scholars to either draw about or label if they have the picture prompt already in front of them, what they see. They can also do a free write about a chosen topic, like I said, what they did over the weekend or maybe what they're doing for Thanksgiving, and having them draw and begin to label about that. So for some scholars, this will literally only be drawing because they still might be struggling with their letter sounds. So those are for our really, really low scholars. But if they can thoroughly explain to you or another scholar what they are drawing and trying to create a story about, that is also progress, because eventually once they get to understand letter sounds and blending, those other things will come. But if they can verbally tell you what they drew a picture about, that is awesome. So for our higher scholars, it's going to be going back the next day and putting details into a sentence, which could be used with those sentence stems that you have in your classroom, which will be like 1 to 2 sentences. And then for other scholars, it would just be adding more details to their pictures. So for our lower scholars that drew, just adding more things like where are you, what's happening, who is there with you, what did you all do. Adding those details for them to be able to also talk about is how they would do that on their level. And then the next day, revising sentences. So those lower scholars, we can try to get them to start beginning labeling with just the beginning sounds. But for our higher scholars, we want them to make sure that they have those uppercase letters, the spacing, and the punctuation. And even add more sentences, such as, like I said, if you're circling nouns or underlining verbs, if they can do that in their sentence to push them to have that challenge as well, is great. And then lastly, they share out about what they wrote about, which is really important, like I say, for them to verbally explain, and that goes across the board, because not only do we want to make sure that they're writing, but we want them to enjoy what they're writing and really have something to say. So they could work through any of these steps during any free time they have during the days, because I know for a lot of us, our writing blocks aren't that long. But if they have these writing journals, they could pull them out anytime they finish their work early. If they had breakfast at home, they could do it in the morning, and so on and so forth. So make sure to start incorporating this free writing in these writing journals, because we really want them to start building that stamina and gain that love for writing. So upcoming, so office hours were yesterday, but they are uploaded to Blackboard. So please make sure to check that out. I talked about a good amount of I tried to touch on all of your questions and requests that you had from Collab Day and the survey that you all took.